And I had to get used to the idea that I like went and knocked on a door, and that single interaction may be the only interaction I ever get with that person. And so it you have to work with what you got in the moment. There isn't this sort of like, well, I'll put a pin in that and come back to it in a future meeting, or like you don't have this sort of part of like waiting for a moment in which something's happening in their life that allows you to speak to a particular idea or a theology. Or doing it with chaplaincy, you walk in and you use whatever's there. One of the greatest quotes about clinical pastoral education that sticks with me was the idea of 90% of the work is showing up. Or there was one of the mentors who used to say, don't just do something, stand there. And the idea is what you're really doing as a chaplain is you are the only one in the hospital environment who has no other task. Your only job is to be the spiritual and emotional support for that patient while you're with them. And so it can look like anything. It can look like holding their hand because they just need to not be alone. It could be working through, why is this happening to me? Where is God in the midst of it? It can be, I have no faith at all, but I need to try and make sense to what's happening to me. Or it could be the family member who's overwhelmed, who's like trying to listen to a doctor who can't, because of their emotional and otherwise, like they're under such pressure and stress in that moment that like they can't process any information. And so your job is to like be their ears. And then the doctor walks away because they have other patients or other things. And they ask you that question of like, well, what did he just say?
Right.
And you have to kind of like, what did you hear? What can I tell you? What can I repeat that the doctor just said? Because I'm not under that tremendous stress. Like, I am here for you, and my job is to like, so sometimes you're just kind of like the translator in the room. And it was really powerful for me to like learn to take all my stuff and leave it at the door. Like, I had a stressful day. It doesn't matter and like when you're in congregational ministry, like sometimes those things are like very real. Like if I'm having a stressful day at home with the kids, you walk into church and you're talking to somebody else and they may be having a stressful day with their kids, and it becomes this like relatability point or this thing to build or this way to get to know each other over the long term. Like as a chaplain, they don't really need to know me.
Right.
Like that, I am not important in this moment. Like, and our relationship in that way is not really important. It's like, what do you need and how can I meet that need?
Right. Your presence is what you're bringing to the table.
It's like, I had to learn, like, you can't correct somebody's theology in the moment. Like they're in an emergency situation. Like this is sometimes life or death. Like I don't need to be like, well, I'm not so sure that's the most biblically accurate way to translate that. Like, no, like that is selfish in that moment.
Yeah.
And you just work with what you got. And what I loved about it was that opportunity, but it was also what it taught me was like how much I missed relationship building. One of the things when you're working as a clinically trained chaplain is that the ethics of chaplaincy require that you allow people to leave the hospital and you do not get to follow up with them. It's much more like a therapist-patient relationship where it's like, no, you need to keep some professional boundaries in a way that's different than like clergy and congregational ministers have professional boundaries too. But one of them is not like, hey, I don't get to know what happened with Paul and his mom who went home.
Right.
Like she has cancer. She got this really powerful diagnosis. She is no longer acutely ill and then now goes home. And I don't know what happened. Did she live? Did she die? What,
we get birth to death, right?
Yeah. Like in the congregational ministry, you get all of it.
Yeah.
Like in the clinical setting, you don't. And it taught me I missed it. It was like there was a day I still remember going onto the unit and I was standing outside the door, and you get so used to knocking on a door and walking in on a total stranger, like that doesn't get it. At first it's really anxiety producing, but after a while you just kind of like, you get really used to being told, no, I don't want to talk to the chaplain. And that's like, at first you're like, why not? I'm awesome too. And then after a while you're like, No, actually, that's fine with me. Like, check. Like,
Okay.
your need is for me to not be here. I met that need by not being here. And I got a list of patients. Like, you never got through everybody. There was
Right.
always another room to knock on. So you go, but there was a day I remember going to knock on this door, and I went to knock on it, and I thought, I want them to say no, because I don't know that my heart can take getting to know another story right now. And I learned, I was like, oh, that's about me. And it's a really important thing to know of, like, this is the kind of ministry that feeds me, is to be able to do that follow-up work and to be able to do that long-term pastoral care that's different than spiritual chaplaincy. Like, it's different than working with what you got. It's sort of like, there's more, not that, I mean, there's amazing transformation possible for individuals in that critical moment of their life, but it's just a moment. It's not like getting to revisit a long-term issue with a person over 5 years or whatever it would be, like a long timetable. And so you're like, it's not one visit, it's 5 years worth of coffees. And it's
Gotta be side by side.